My name is Olivia Bradley, and this poem is about being woke. What does woke look like? I'm not always sure. Maybe it's the event you show up to instead of just liked. Is it a meme, a post, or tweet? Or is it the one who spoke instead of just making commentary? We're quick to shout equality and liberty, but can't piece together history to see that in this country, to move forward, I'm told to forget what the forefathers would have done to me if I walked in their communities. What if woke is listening? Trying to hear my ancestors living in the trees, following a second heartbeat. As I analyze my scenery, I feel like a stranger in Dr. King's dream, because I see that amidst the wolves, we are the sheep. We're too overwhelmed to care what being woke means. You can't always see her. At times, woke is a whisper. It needs your help to be a voice, because woke is hungry and it's time to feed. Stop adding to the negativity. Respect yourself and be a voice in the community. Be willing to gather before the next tragedy. No more megabytes or gigabytes of police brutality. We've been feeding a fallacy instead of our community. What if woke means you pick up a ballot and speak? Woke is truth and it won't ignore me. My example is Dr. King. Someone to look up to that I'll never meet. But you can be an activist when you're dead, you see. Because his words sparked my curiosity. What happened to those before me? And now, in whose perspective have I seen? Woke looks like pain. Woke is peeling off your own skin and poking through the raw meat of your father's mistakes and your mother's regret. What does woke look like? Woke is noticing everyone's asleep. But you can't tiptoe anymore. That moment before you're about to give up, it's how your voice trembles. When you're carrying too much weight. But somehow, in that space, by the strength of your ancestors, you tie your heartstrings around the truth and place that sweet, heavy fruit on your tongue. Woke looks like opening your eyes. Wiping away the crusty corners and cobwebs of dreams, peeling back from our broken sheets, cracking our weariness, checking our energies, stretching our crinkled spirits. What does woke look like? Most times I can't see. However, there is a spirit in me, and most everybody, that allows that opportunity for integrity. What does woke look like? Maybe you should ask yourself.
So in your own words, who are you?
I'm a weirdo. I'm angry. I act like I'm smarter than I actually am. I am more complicated than I really need to be. I'm also a poet and a writer, and currently I'm a theater manager and a podcast personality, a master of nothing but a dabbler in all.
I would say I'm a mother. I'm a student, constantly. I'm a poet, for sure. I think there's parts of myself I'm still also figuring out, because I'm getting a little older, a little wiser, understanding more context about life, but I'm still awkward at times. But I think I'm authentic. Yeah.
I agree with that. So how did you guys discover poetry?
trauma. That's really probably how I would put it. For me, it wasn't necessarily poetry at first. It was more just journaling. I still have a tendency to just worry and keep thoughts just in my brain, and I'll analyze conversations hours after I've already had them, and writing it down at a younger age was the only way I could purge and get it out, and I could have some silence in my brain. Poetry, though, came out of trauma. Just, after relationships and things not working out and growing up and life and just putting together the pieces of the puzzle, just trying to make beauty out of that trauma.
Well, poetry and literature has always been around me. My parents are both big into a lot of different authors and writers, and one of my earliest memories is my dad reading Edgar Allan Poe's *The Raven* to me to help me get to sleep, because apparently something about the cadence of him reading that poem used to just knock me out. And then as I got older, I discovered poetry on my own, just reading different writers and finding out that there were so many different ways to tell a story. There were so many different ways to explore ideas, to get down to the essence of a concept in a way that poetry forces you to be efficient in some ways, that other forms of writing require you to elaborate and really take up space with the words, where I feel like I learned that poetry, in the spaces it leaves, gives room for the person to come in and to find deeper meanings, to impose their own meanings into it, and to still learn something and still connect. So I think that I just became fascinated with that, just from being part of a family that was big into reading and big into stories, and also that we all have the habit of, we love hearing ourselves talk, we love telling stories. So the art form just captured my fascination. And then when I got older, I was an incredibly introverted kid growing up, for the most part. And writing gave me a way to stay connected to the world around me and myself. And then when I started to share that poetry is when I think I really found my real appreciation for it. When I realized that those moments of private self-reflection and introversion, that everyone should share them. You should know the impact it can have on other people, just like the words of so many writers have impacted me. I found connection through writing and sharing poetry that I don't think any other art form could give me.
You made me think of, like, there's a responsibility almost. Like, once you know that it connects you and other people feel it, it's like, I have to do this now.
Yeah.
I'm a poet now.
Like, oh well, drafted. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringings?
I am originally born in Knoxville, Tennessee. I came from a family of two parents. I have an older brother. My parents have been together since like the 5th grade. So I've really always kind of like looked up to the relationship and still do. I enjoyed my youth. I did always feel different though. Knoxville is not the most diverse city, nor is the South. I mean, it's just what I learned at an early age was, you know, civil rights videos, and my parents would take us and put us places where we could be around people that looked like us. But where I lived and where I was zoned for school, no, I was not around people that looked like me. And they made sure to point it out. If I wasn't at school, I was at daycare. And at daycare, there was less people that looked like me. So I spent the majority of the day just having kids acknowledge, like, oh, you're different. Oh, you look different. No, you can't play Foursquare. your hair or your whatever. It's just, it's annoying. It's irritating, to say the least. But then on the other end, because of the things I learned and who I was around and how I talked, when I did get around people who looked like me, I was still feeling like a black sheep. Like, so that part of me kind of developed a sense of like, well, forget it, I don't care. I mean, doesn't matter. Yeah, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So, but with my upbringing, I think my parents and my brother, we always communicated. So within my family unit, if there was an issue or a problem, we're gonna talk about it. Even if it's, you know, if it turns into an argument for yelling, no matter. We're gonna finish it today. So that's what I really appreciate about my family. And I came to Chattanooga after going to college, went to UTC in 2006. I graduated in 2010. That was an experience of itself. I enjoy learning, I do. But I also have over time learned more about this city and this state. And I don't know, there's a sense of apathy around that it's kind of, it's hard to push through it. It's almost like a dense fog, and it's like, maybe if I can just talk about it through this poetry, at least it's documented somewhere. I mean, I wrote it down. At least my son can see it. Growing up, though, just having that communication base and having that outlet through journaling, I think it just kind of produced the end result that I have now. College, I think, led out to a lot of insecurities personally coming out of me. So after college and working, I ended up in a relationship that wasn't the best. There was abuse, and I was arrested, and I hit a low and a really bottomed out. But it was necessary. Like, I had to stop. You know what I'm saying? And I guess that was just how it stopped at that time. So that was okay. And at that time, the people that were around me had mentioned, oh, you know, there's places that you can go and like share your poetry and, you know, hang out with people. Are you interested? And I did. I met some phenomenal people, including you. And it's led to me building a level of confidence and like love within myself that I would go through it again in a heartbeat if I had to. It's not an issue.
Yeah. You hit on something really interesting. Iyanla Vanzant said fairly recently that whenever you're thrust into a new situation, the first thing that bubbles to the top are your insecurities. And it's interesting that, you know, those things are always going to be present when you find yourself in new surroundings. And it seems like, you know, both writing provided catharsis and then later a community to kind of help work through those things.
Yeah. Letting it out is one thing, but being able to be there for somebody else or, you know, just appreciate somebody else is another. And, you know, I think sometimes artists just struggle with showing that appreciation for one another because we're very sensitive about our stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But I do appreciate that the community exists. There's somebody to listen. It's just, you know, not me by myself.
So I had a great family. I have a great family. Like, my parents are very loving and supportive and awesome, funny, smart, kind people. And, you know, they've both been married before, but they've been together as long as I've been alive. I remember growing up and envying my older siblings and my cousins because they all got to grow up in New Orleans together with this big, sprawling, extended family. And I never knew that except for like around holidays or when we visit or do road trips together. So I had these little moments of it, these stints of feeling like I belonged somewhere, which is only when all of my family was together. But most of the time I was very isolated. I became very introverted as a kid. I remember hitting middle school and hating it because none of the few friends I had from elementary school went to the same middle school. So here I was once again, completely by myself. And that's actually when I started writing, because I didn't have a lot of people to talk to at first. And I'd like to say I found myself in my writing, but at first I lost myself in it. It was mostly writing about all the things I'm not, and that I wish I was. At the time that I wished I was. Coming to terms with my own sexuality, realizing that, I had no interest in the girls in class, but that's all dudes talked about, and like knowing that that was weird and that was gonna cause problems. Even being threatened a couple of times as I came out to a couple of friends and they ran their mouths to the wrong people, and then here come the bullies. Luckily, I knew how to wield a math book. Things is heavy. But I kept writing. It became a habit. It's just something you do. Especially when you feel like there wasn't anybody you could talk to.
Once you know it works for you, it becomes addicting.
Yeah, it just puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
And then when I did get to the point, in high school, I actually started making real, genuine friends for what I felt like was for the first time. Ironically, it was because of my writing and because a girl who wound up becoming one of my very close friends just happened to pick up my notebook by accident. Read some things while she had it home with her for a couple of days, and then the next day at school she goes, "Oh, by the way, in case you're looking for it, this is yours, and you write." And I got mad at her.
I was going to say, how did you
I got so
feel
mad
about
at her.
that?
I got so angry because then she kept asking me about my writing, and she cared. It was I accidentally my writing was accidentally shared with somebody, and we connected over it.
Yeah.
And that opened me up. Then I started realizing that people can be understanding, even when you have very little in common with them. And then as I got older and went off to college, that's when I actually started trying to go to open mics and coffee shops and things, and just saying, "Hey, let me put some of this poetry out there and see what people think." The first 5 or 6 times I almost vomited because the nerves got to me badly, really badly. And I say 5 or 6 times, I don't mean 5 or 6 times, oh, by the end of the year I was good. No, I mean 5 or 6 times over the span of about as many years. Just took a lot of trying. And all through it, I just kept feeling alone and feeling like I needed to connect, because I didn't, even when I came to Chattanooga for college, it was I didn't have my family here. And despite having a wonderful family, I've always felt disconnected. And writing is the only thing that's ever made me feel like I have an anchor that holds me to other people.
How much does your upbringing factor into the work that you do now?
I never expected poetry to take me anywhere. I never expected poetry in the first place for myself. I always appreciated it and I always read, but I never expected myself to influence anyone with poetry. My upbringing, I think it has quite a bit to do why me and poetry came into contact, I guess. I've just lived around insecurity for so long. I know how to operate around it. I know what it looks like in other people. I know what it looks like in myself. And I just now got to the point where I can like communicate it to others. And that's where poetry came into play. So I feel like my upbringing had a lot to do with bringing out pieces of me that I had to acknowledge, whether they were good or bad.
Sure.
And just knowing that my family was just the type to always communicate, and I just owed it to myself, kind of, to a certain extent.
I think I wouldn't write the way I do without my upbringing, without having like that literary presence in the house, and just like having parents who talk about books and who introduce me to different writers at an early age, who pushed me at a super young age to like start reading full books and novellas, and they weren't afraid to let me pursue weird stuff. Like, yeah, you know, here I am, like 8, 9 years old, and I'm like, hey, Dad, that poem they used to read to me when I was little, The Raven, yeah. So like, well, here's a whole bunch of Edgar Allan Poe. Like, learn more about him, study his work. Here's Maya Angelou, and like, let's talk about like how rough her life was. My parents encouraged critical thinking and creativity. They always have. And to enjoy it, like to genuinely enjoy it, not to treat it like it was something, oh, you should read these things, you should study these things, it's your duty. It was more of a, no, this is great, this is fun. Now we can argue about it. Now we can tear it apart. Now we can reinterpret it, and not be afraid to make something new. So I think, yeah, my upbringing definitely has a lot to do with the work I do now. I don't think that I would have the foundation to build from, or that sense of curiosity, like still being curious about what else is out there, whose work have I not read, whose words have I not heard, and also understanding very honestly that just because someone is recognized by academia doesn't mean they're the best necessarily. That there's great work being created every day, and sometimes it's just by everyday people. And that appreciation for that possibility, I think, has come from my family.
When did you first consider yourselves poets? I love the faces.
I know. I never considered myself one until other people called me one.
Same.
Like, yeah, it's not. I would never go into a room and say, I'm a poet.
I do it all the time now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I haven't shared my poetry for very long. So it's probably been maybe 2 years. So it's very new for me to say I'm a poet.
I didn't take it seriously at first, I'll be honest. Like going to Rhyme and Chat and Speakeasy back in the day is like, I didn't take myself seriously as a poet. So even when I would get introduced as a poet, or other people would refer to me as, hey, you're that poet, I didn't trust it. Even though I was writing poetry, and it wasn't until Ray Zimmerman actually put it in perspective for me that I was a poet because I created poetry. That's it. And no, that's the requirement. But not only that is that I was honing it. It wasn't just enough to say, oh, I wrote a poem, I'm a poet. It was, this is a craft that I take seriously. This is something that I work at, something that I fret over, that that some parts become reflexive and others are like training for a marathon, you know? Like it's part of my life. And I think it was when I understood that it was really part of my life, and that other people, that part of me impacted other people as a poet. Like the poet in me was what was engaging the world. That's when I took it seriously, and I started calling myself a poet.
How large of a role would you say your own identities play in your work?
It's all of it. Like most of my writing started off with me sorting my identity, trying to figure out my place in the world. And I'm still trying to figure out my place in the world. It's an ongoing journey. And if I wasn't who I am, if I wasn't all the things I am, I don't know what I would write about. I really don't. I write mostly from my own perspective, about my own experiences, the questions I have, the fears and passions and joys and pain and all that good stuff. And when I try to open up that perspective into, well, I want, of course, the way I write, I want other people to relate to it as broadly as possible, but it's always still rooted in my identities as a black man from Louisiana, as a gay man, as someone who is, had a long history in my adult life of working in activism. Like these are all things that are part of who I am. Also a recovering Catholic. All of these play into my writing, so I think that it's literally everything. I couldn't imagine writing anything else as anyone else. I just don't think I could.
I think I struggle though with, I identify as a black cisgender woman. I sometimes don't even like to call myself black because that's a color. And I just sometimes feel like people assume what I'm going to talk about because of that. And when I say I am a poet, I don't like that. Like, I don't like you to assume what I'm gonna say or speak on, because my poetry, not only is it cathartic, but it gives me just the chance to make other people think about things maybe they didn't think about, or I get to ask a question that I normally wouldn't be able to ask in a social setting because it would rub people the wrong way. But when I ask it in poetry, people can ponder and I have your attention. Because I do feel like an introvert most times in social settings. I feel very awkward. I wouldn't necessarily ask the questions unless it's someone I really feel comfortable debating about with the topics. And there's not that many people on earth that I do. So I can use my poetry to get that out. Like to communicate stuff inside of me that I struggle with, because I do struggle with my identity.
What are some of the frustrations you have with being writers here?
Nobody appreciates artists in this town.
Why do you think that is?
There is a sense in Chattanooga, there's no sense of Chattanooga pride. Like, people in Chattanooga are not proud of what comes from here, and they should be. If there's an artist working here, they don't appreciate them until they move to San Antonio or New York or Chicago or LA or New Orleans or anywhere else on the map. They can just go hop down to Atlanta, and all of a sudden they're super popular in Chattanooga. But the years that they were hustling here meant nothing.
Sure.
And that's a huge frustration, is that until you leave this town, it's really hard to get any kind of support. I mean, and we have phenomenal artists in this town of all kinds who can hold their own. And that's the thing that we don't seem to appreciate about Chattanooga is it's so hard to be an artist here. One, you really gotta want it. You really gotta want it. And you gotta keep working at it just to keep your spirit in it. And you work so hard and you build up this thicker skin and this resolve, if you're gonna make it, that when we do go to other towns, we can hold our own in any of those communities, because we've had to tough it out when no one was cheering for us. Yeah. We've had to go out there and say, like, the best thing you can hope for is, like, at the end of the night, one person will say, that was all right. Chattanooga has a problem with apathy about its own things. And this is a city full of talent and dreamers and creative people who are unmatched. But even the best of us. In Chattanooga, nobody gives a damn because you're in Chattanooga. You'll be treated better by strangers in a different city than you will in the city you grew up in. And I've seen it happen to plenty of artists.
Right.
I say more spaces available for artists to come and feel like they can either develop or just produce. Like I just wish there was someone I could go, and it may be 3 o'clock in the morning, but I can go to this place. I know I can write, I can chill, I can do whatever and become better or get feedback from peers. Or I feel like I found that at times and I've loved it, but I've had to search for it at other times. And it's not always as available or as convenient as I wish it was. I think Chattanooga prides itself on how cultural it is and how big it's growing and how much technology it has, but what's technology without spirit? I mean, or someone to run it or appreciate what it can do for you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Chattanooga's focus is really.
Not just Chattanooga, so that's fair.
Right. And I get distracted by what the city looks like because I see murals of people that look like me in areas that they can't hang out at. So.
That's real.
What are you trying to say? I mean, I just get that vibe. When I even came to Chattanooga, people were telling me it's like a black hole. You can't get out. Like, you get sucked into just the negativity or something. I don't know what it is. But that apathy, I feel that. There's always this conversation about, well, what are we supposed to do? I don't know, start with yourself. I mean, honestly, what are you supposed to do? All I can do is what Olivia can do. And I mean, I barely figured that out, so I can't tell you what to do yet.
Right.
I can tell you what's good for me.
You have both been active for a number of years in the scene. What changes have you noticed, and what would you like to see?
I've seen, honestly, since I first came into the poetry scene, I've seen occasional bursts of experimentation that have been really wonderful, even when they didn't work. The fact that you had people taking the art forms of written and spoken word and trying something different, trying to incorporate, can we get away with an entire show of erotic poetry? Well, yes, you can. Can we use storytelling to raise awareness about environmental issues? Yeah, you sure can. You've seen these attempts to use the art form in ways that are relevant to people in some way, and that's been a good change I've seen. A negative change I've seen is that it has gotten more competitive.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Competition.
it's a spirit that wasn't. It was there, kinda, ish, but it felt like more friendly competition. Oh, we're gonna go after the same thing, but if you get it, I'm just as happy as if I got it because you're still part of my community. You're somebody who I respect as an artist and as a peer. So you win, I win. I win, you win. Because I know also that feeling is mutual. And I feel like, especially in that poetry and spoken word scene, that the competition is consuming the craft and the community. That it's better to one-up somebody than to step up with somebody. And there's lines of territory being marked off. Oh, this is my show, this is how I do things, and if you do the same thing I do, then that's a problem, this weird policing in the community that has gotten worse. There's always been this weird divide between the more academic, written for the page poets in the area and the more stage performance oriented poets. But even that always felt still semi-permeable at certain points. And I just feel like not only is that gotten more rigid from my perspective, that new new kingdoms have popped up, you know, and it's frustrating because it's like you didn't always have to prove yourself to somebody that you were worth their time. There were more poets who had influence, who would see the passion and the potential of someone rather than saying, oh, I need you to show up fully formed and able to throw down and be a badass, or I ain't got time for you. Rather it was like, oh, I see you've got something to say. You have a need, you have a desire to create and to express. Okay, well, I'll help you do that. I'll give you a space to do it in. I'll give you advice and feedback if you want it. If you don't want it, cool, that's fine too. You just do your thing. But if you want it, I'm here for you. And I'm seeing less and less of that. Like, I feel like you, Christian, are definitely of the former ilk, because I wouldn't be in this scene if it wasn't for you. I've tried to recreate that with like the shows I host.
Marcus Ellsworth, and this poem is called Indulgence. All right, so I'm over it. All these lines dividing our times, turning identities into crimes, making the poor pay your fines so you can have a good time and have the audacity to whine that I'm not being fair to an unfair system. But you want to put up borders under the orders of God according to the hoarders of all the money and Breitbart reporters? Well, go ahead. Put up a wall around the altar and a line of televangelists around Mexico standing wallet to Bible from sea to shining sea. Just go nuts, because it doesn't matter where you draw your lines or how you make them. Because the nonsense that you claim gives you domain to try to keep the rest of us tame, well, it's rotting your brain and sending freedom down the drain. You beg, control her body. You plead, control their border. You demand, control their gender. You whisper, control their color. Well, you better get hip to Zen, baby, because control is an illusion that we have unfortunately allowed you to have. And by we, I mean all of us freaks, heathens, and radicals out there who refuse to squish ourselves into your tiny myopic world. And you say we're gonna burn for it. And you are absolutely right. We should burn for who we are with 1,000 watts of riotous power. And for all you good conservative Christian folk who deep down think the rhetoric from your pulpit smells a bit like bullshit, well, hop that line and join the good fights with us. Christ did it till they nailed him. So make like my boy JC and hang with a couple of crooks like me. You might learn something. Like how God ain't the same for everybody. I'll give you an example. See, I believe God is a fat Creole woman, popping bonbons and sipping malt liquor in her Cumulus Stratus easy chair, watching all of us down here like a bad midnight movie as she turns to her lover Mary and says, baby, can you believe this shit? Now, if we were all made in the image of that multiracial mama, why can't we be good kids and just play nice together? So come on. Tear down those walls and barriers. Rip up that fence and embrace your neighbor. Come together and say it with me. God is good, ain't she?